Listen to the end of today's show to find out the hidden twist in our opening story. I live on the 8th floor of a 10-floor apartment building. Work's very busy, so I always get home late. On this particular day, it was raining a little. The gentle drops fell on my shoulders and felt nice. However, the usually bright elevator hall was scarily dark. I soon realized why. One of the fluorescent lights wasn't working, but it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. This type of thing often happened when the apartment building supervisor was working late. Unconcerned with a single light, I pressed the elevator button and waited. When the elevator reached the first floor and opened, I was shocked. Someone was in there. It's an elevator, so of course it's not strange that someone would be in there. But I'd never once passed anyone on my way home before, and the person inside was just standing there with her back to me, showing no signs of getting out. It was a woman wearing a red dress with a red ribbon. I hesitated for a moment about whether I should get on or not, but it would seem a little strange if I didn't, so I quietly entered. With the woman's back still facing me, I pressed the button for the 8th floor. I soon noticed that none of the other buttons had been pressed, and realized I'd made a mistake. I shouldn't have pressed the button for my own floor. Wow, was the elevator always this slow? I wondered, while staring at the ceiling light. The woman continued to stand there, with her back towards me, unmoving. The elevator reached the 8th floor, and I got off, but the woman continued to face the other way. When I got to my apartment, I calmed down a little and took a shower. I drank some beer and went to grab another from the fridge, but noticed it was empty. There was a convenience store nearby. I put on some shoes and called for the elevator. As the doors opened, the woman was still inside. Just like before, her back was to me, and she wasn't moving. I didn't take the elevator down. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Last week we released our second episode of Toshiden, exploring Japanese urban legends. Have you been listening to it? Last week's episode focused on various cursed phone call legends, taking a deeper look at the likes of Mary-san, Kaijin Answer, and Satoru-kun. If you're interested, head over to kowabana.net and give it a listen. I'd also like to say a big thank you to everyone who has been supporting the show through our Patreon and also buying the books on Amazon. Quite a few people have been messaging me lately to let me know what they think of the show, and it really means a lot to me. You guys are awesome. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for more updates and creepy Japanese tidbits. You can find all of those links over at kowabana.net. Now, this week's episode is about supernatural and unexplainable experiences. Unlike Western horror, where if we don't get an explanation by the end of the story, people get upset, Japanese horror, for the most part, relies more on mood and atmosphere. It's about taking a regular person, just like you or me, through a range of experiences they can't explain until they either survive or die trying. there's much less focus on why something is happening and more on how a person feels and reacts to it. This is a key difference. Our first story this week is about a young couple who spend the night in a luxurious hotel on their way back to the young man's hometown. While everything starts out great, they soon find out why the room was so cheap. Find out what happens in The Reason the Hotel Was So Cheap. This is a story about when I went to a hot spring in Shizuoka Prefecture. I took my girlfriend with me when I went to visit my family home for a memorial service, and we stayed at a certain hot spring. With not much time, we picked a hotel on the fly, and with dinner included, it came to 26,000 yen. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect, but when they showed us to our room, it was huge. The living room was 12 tatami mats, and there was a sliding screen separating it from the bedroom, which was another 8 tatami mats. The bathtub was also made of Japanese cypress. It was gorgeous. I remarked on how cheap it was, and although it was old-fashioned, it had a certain dignity to it. We went down to the public baths right away. As night fell, we ordered dinner in our room, and it was magnificent. Fresh seafood, beef teppanyaki, and several bottles of sake. This place sure is amazing. What a great find! We certainly made the right choice here. The two of us celebrated. We drank a bit more, and then got in the tub for a bit of fun. We moved to the bedroom behind the sliding screen, lay out our futons, turn the lights off, and watch TV together. A short while later, I could hear the sound of my girlfriend sleeping, and nodding off while I watched the TV, I also fell asleep. Sometime later, my eyes suddenly shot open. It was probably close to midnight. The moon cast a dim light through the screen door, so the room was rather dark. And even though I never put the sleep timer on the TV, for some reason it was off. Did my girlfriend turn it off? I went to look at my phone to see what the time was, fumbling around for it by my pillow. But then I heard something. It was like the sound of someone breathing roughly. I thought it was my girlfriend, snoring strangely, and finally found my phone. I checked the time, and it was just past 2 a.m. I can still sleep, I thought. I shone the light from the screen on my girlfriend's face. She was still awake. I could dimly see her face in the light. Her eyes were wide open, and her lips pulled back in a horrifying grin. The sound I heard was the sound of her breath pushing through her teeth. What the hell? I began to panic. Hey, are you okay? What's wrong? I tried to wake her up, but she just looked at me and pointed to something behind me. I turned my head slowly to look and saw the sliding screen was wide open. The living room was even darker than the bedroom. I turned my phone light towards what my girlfriend was pointing at, and hanging from the top of the door was a yukata belt, fashioned like a noose. Huh? What the hell? What is that? I couldn't process what was happening and started to panic. I couldn't move. My girlfriend's eyes continued to glisten and her entire face smiled. Then just her mouth moved, and in a small voice, she began to speak. Use it, use it, use it, use it. Although I was a big fan of scary things, I was also a scaredy cat. And because I was unable to fathom just what was happening, I passed out. I don't have any memory of what happened after that. I later woke up to the faint sound of the TV. I instantly jumped out of bed. It was just a dream. The sliding screen was closed, and there was no belt hanging from the doorframe. The TV was on as well. Thank God, it really was just a dream. I was relieved. My girlfriend was still asleep, but her face was kind of a mess. At any rate, I shook her to wake her up. She got up with a start. She looked at me with this feeling of fear and mistrust on her face. "What is it? Are you okay?" I asked, and trembling, she opened up. She had a strange, scary dream the night before. She woke up and saw I was no longer in bed. She turned the bedside lamp on, and in the darkness, saw me hanging a belt from the doorframe, like I was getting ready to hang myself. Surprised, she called out, "What are you doing?" "Look, it's ready. Let's use this," I replied, a wide grin on my face. I was so surprised at what she told me that I nearly fell out of bed, but I didn't dare tell her about the dream I had. If she knew that we both had similar dreams, she might think that it was some kind of curse or something. "You just had a nightmare. It's okay," I consoled her. "Anyway, let's go have some breakfast and get going," I said, and we left the room. But neither of us were especially hungry, and we left the cafeteria having barely touched a thing. I stopped at the reception counter on our way back to the room and asked the ryokan waitress, "Excuse me, regarding our room, did anyone ever hang themselves there?" Of course, she gave a vague answer, but when we were checking out, the price was 6,000 yen cheaper than I expected. I've left out some of the finer details, but this is a true story. If you're ever staying in a hot spring in Shizuoka, be careful. The room may be gorgeous, and the food splendid, but there's also the chance you may be forced into a double suicide. There's a good way to check if there's ever been a death in your hotel room in Japan. This is a story I heard from one of my students who worked in a hotel. A hotel urban legend, if you like. But if you check behind the painting on the wall, you can sometimes find a talisman or charm stuck there. If you do, there's a very good chance someone died in that very room. But whatever you do, don't take that talisman off. As we know from the many stories on this show, it never ends well. Our next story is about a curse afflicting a particular neighborhood, or more accurately, one small area in the neighborhood. When people stand on this cursed ground, they die. What happens when a young man's father falls, heading straight for the cursed ground below? Find out in If You Go Near There, People Will Die. This is a story from when I was still living at home. The neighborhood association where I lived got together once a month to clean the roads in the area. Then everyone went out drinking afterwards. On this particular day, they were cleaning a shrine or a temple that people had worshipped at from long ago. For some reason, the elderly folks in the neighborhood association refused to go near it. So their children, my father's generation, would clean the area once every 6 months instead. But there was just one place, the U-shaped gutter, that was said to have an interesting history. If you go near there, people will die, the elderly said. But my father's generation thought it was just an old superstition, so they cleaned it without care. But when they did, one of the old men, who was healthy that day, died suddenly that night. He died at home in his bathroom, so the police got involved, but they said he died of a stroke. But he was so energetic and a picture of health itself at lunchtime, so for him to die so suddenly caused some people to claim that it was because he cleaned near the U-shaped gutter. The rumor soon became the talk of the town. After that, things got busy, and there was no time to clean the neighborhood. But a few years later, the day came again. Even though it was a holy place, the elderly were opposed to cleaning that area, and they decided to avoid the U-shaped gutters. But of course, there were some people who didn't care and thought it was all just a superstition, and they went about cleaning the gutters anyway. While some people opposed it, it's dangerous. Most just thought it to be a funny story and paid little attention to it. But the next day, one of the people who cleaned that area got caught under his farming machinery and died. He apparently got sucked under the blades and cut up. Seeing as it happened again, people believed there might actually be something to the rumors. But the only people who might know the truth were the elderly, most of whom had passed on. And, being a time of science, even if people were scared, some still didn't really believe in it. But with 2 people from the same generation dead, it was decided to avoid that area, and the next time the neighborhood cleaning came around, nobody went near the gutters. The cleaning proceeded well, but when my father was cutting an overgrown tree down, he slipped from the branch he was standing on and fell. It nearly became a terrible accident, but for his friend, who was nearby and caught him at the bottom. But where that friend caught him was the real problem. It was the area they decided no one should clean. It was the cover of the U-shaped gutter. This is no good, the nearby people muttered, the atmosphere quickly changing. But if he was just standing on the cover, it should be okay, they thought. The next moment, however, there was a sound from beneath, like banging, and the cover began to lift up and down a few times. For the cover to be able to lift 2 grown men standing on it, the people freaked out and called it a day. Everyone was silent on their way home. The next day, my father's friend died. Apparently he was out fishing when he fell into the water. The people who were with him said, "We were just chatting like normal, when suddenly he lost his balance and fell into the ocean." My father screamed at them, asking why they didn't help him, but Apparently he was already dead before he hit the water, and there was nothing they could do for him. According to my father, this year there was an earthquake, so we didn't do any cleaning. But next time we do, I don't want to go near that area. That's the true story of what happened in my hometown and my father's unbelievable supernatural experience. This is perhaps not so common in other countries, but neighborhood cleanups are a big part of Japanese culture, especially in the countryside. The area I lived in also had community cleanup days once every few months. It's a good way to foster better relationships throughout the community and clean up the environment while you're at it. Thankfully, there was no cursed land near where I lived, at least that I knew of. This next story is about a brother and sister who find out something incredibly disturbing when they go to hand in their mother's death notice at the city hall. Find out what in Our Mother's Death Notice. When I was just a kid, my father passed away, leaving my mother to work and raise both myself and my older sister alone. In reality, she was really kind and raised us with a lot of affection. But then 10 years ago, when I was 20, she also passed away. We never had any contact with other family members, and I certainly didn't know how to contact any, so my sister and I had to do everything ourselves. An old lady from the neighborhood helped us and gave us advice, so preparations for the funeral moved along at a steady pace. My sister went with the old lady to the ward office to deliver the death notice, but when they returned, both of their faces were blue. Like, actually blue. My sister looked like she was about to burst into tears. I asked the old lady what happened, and she said that the ward office informed her that our mother died 18 years earlier. Come to think of it, it was strange that her name wasn't on my health insurance card. So, who exactly was it that raised me for those 20 years then? I don't know about you guys, but I really like this one. It's both terrifying and heartwarming at the same time. Although, it's a little worrying the author never noticed his mother's name wasn't on his health insurance card. That's probably something you'd want to get checked out. Our last story for this week is about a young man who can't sleep, so he decides to grab something to watch from the video store. On the way back, he finds a young boy playing in the park, despite the fact it's after midnight. What is the boy hiding? Find out in If the Bad Guy Gets Caught, He Dies. Okay? At around midnight, I went to a video store that was about 15 minutes from my house, but nothing really grabbed me, so I left. On the way back, I passed my old kindergarten. Beyond a tall pink fence, there was an open space with a sand pit, slide, and so on. I stopped to look at it for a moment, feeling nostalgic. Suddenly, I noticed a boy in shorts, t-shirt, and a red and white cap on the other side of the fence. He was looking right at me. It scared the crap out of me. What on earth was he doing there? I didn't want to get wrapped up in any trouble, so I looked around, but there was nobody about. "Hey, Let's play! The kid stuck his hand through the fence and pulled on my shirt. Flustered, I tried to break free and told him, "Sorry, I need to get back home." "What are you doing out here so late anyway? You better go back home too." He pulled my shirt even harder. "Hey, let's play!" He thrust his other hand out through the fence, but I managed to dodge it. Then, with a power I would never have expected from a young child, he yanked me into the fence. "Bedtime is boring, so I snuck out. Let's play." This time he grabbed my right hand, smiling the whole time. I was scared. My heart started pounding. "Hey, let's play cops and robbers. You can be the bad guy, okay?" I tried to escape, but the kid was just too strong. "Okay? If you say okay, I'll let you go." He looked up at me and smiled again. Not thinking it through, I said, "Yeah, okay." He let go of my hand, and I fell over. I got up and took off running. I could hear the boy's voice behind me, laughing like he was having a ball. "Okay, I'm the police. If the bad guy gets caught, he dies, okay?" The metal fence opened with a loud rattle, and I heard the sound of footsteps. I ran as fast as I could towards home. A short while later, I reached my neighborhood. Once I got past the park, I'd be home. I looked behind me, and no one was there. While catching my breath, I slowed down to a quick walk. "Found the bad guy." Right as I heard his voice, he came running at me from the park entrance. I ran. I felt sick, but all I could do was run. Before I knew it, I reached the street arcade. The shutters were closed on all the shops. I couldn't take it anymore and stopped to catch my breath. "I caught the bad guy." Small, cold hands wrapped around my wrist. "The punishment is death, remember?" My exhaustion and fear mixed and I lashed out, but the boy refused to let go. "Let go of me!" "Nope." He squeezed even tighter. I saw a dirty, homeless guy sleeping out the corner of my eye. "I'm not the bad guy. He is." I pointed towards him. The boy looked at him before letting me go. "Really? In that case, I'll go catch him and give him the death penalty." The boy ran towards the homeless guy. I took off running towards my house. Next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was in the front entrance of my house. Apparently, I'd passed out there. In the rays of the sun, I sighed in relief. I looked at my wrist and saw a very distinct handprint wrapped around it. That day, the news reported about the strange death of a homeless person nearby. His neck was broken. I still have no idea who or what that kid was. The author of this story mentioned at the start that he was bored, so he went to the video store around midnight. This was something I found fascinating and really enjoyed while I was living in Japan. Video stores are still a huge business there, and many are open until after midnight. I often found myself riding down the street at midnight myself, to go and look at video games or DVDs. Renting CDs is also incredibly popular, but I just find it really interesting that even though people consider Japan to be really technologically advanced, they're very resistant to change when it comes to some things. And some of those things include physical CDs, DVDs, and games. So, did you catch the hidden twist in today's opening story? The man mentioned the light in the elevator was off, and there was a woman there, but she wasn't moving. He soon realized he made a mistake getting on, and when he returned shortly after to head out for some beer, she was still there. He decided to take the stairs instead. This was because the woman had hung herself in the elevator and was already dead. And that's all for this week's show. Don't forget you can get bonus episodes and early access to both this show and Toshiden over at our Patreon, and even more news, updates, and short horror by following us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can find the links to all of those over at kowabana.net. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next week for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.